Now, the police officer interview forms part of the assessment centre for becoming a police officer. It's basically an assessment of whether you match the police officer core competencies that are relevant to the role. And again, you can prepare for this before you actually go to the interview. Now, what I would recommend you do is that you take the core competencies that are required to become a police officer, you sit down and you read them, and you actually come up with a scenario and evidence of where you've matched each particular one. So, for example, if you were to be assessed against the core competency of resilience, then what you would do is try and come up with a scenario of when you have demonstrated resilience during a situation. So say, for example, I was applying to become a police officer and I was currently working as a bar manager. I could say I've demonstrated resilience during my current working position as a bar manager. One day I was at work and a group of 10 men entered the pub, and they seemed to be heavily under the influence of alcohol. They were being quite rowdy, and when they approached the bar and started to be rude to the bar staff, I calmly asked them to leave the pub and said that unfortunately I could not serve them. They then started to respond in an aggressive manner, and again I made sure that I was extremely calm and I asked them to leave the pub. I then reiterated that if they wouldn't leave the pub, then I would be calling the police. The men then left the pub and the situation was resolved. So even though that's just a short sort of offshoot of a sample situation, that is what you need to do, is come up with scenarios, actual evidence of where you demonstrated each assessable core competency, and think about the scenarios carefully. I would also recommend that you write the scenario down. Now obviously you're not going to take that into the interview with you, but what you need to do is write it down, and then that will stick in your mind. I'd recommend that you use the STAR method when preparing for each response. STAR is basically situation, what was the situation, task, what task had to be done, so what did you have to do, what action did you take and why, and also what was the result following your actions. Try and make the result positive. So if you see from that sample scenario that I provided you with then, when I was working as a bar manager, I managed to get the gentleman to leave the pub without any problems. I was totally resilient and they left the pub. Yes, they weren't happy, but they left the pub, which was the goal, and there was no further issues. The responses, you will have approximately 5 minutes to respond to each question, so that's quite a long time. Even though it won't seem like it, it is quite a long time to actually speak. I've been going on for a few minutes now, but try and make sure that you fill up that time. So try and use the 5 minutes carefully, and the only way that you will do that is by carrying out a mock interview at home. So get your 4 responses to the accessible areas and sit down and get a family, friend or relative to ask you the question and then respond to them. Also, don't forget, you'll be assessed against effective communication, so the way you speak is very, very important, and interview technique is also just as important.